Hi. So today I wanted to do a video on something I don't actually have anymore, but it was just like a conversation that got me thinking back to when I used to have it really bad. And I wanted to share a video on how I got out of feeling that very passionateless, joyless, flat, bland feeling. Now, I'd been on the journey for a while, and don't get me wrong, I felt all kinds of emotions. I felt like devastated, you know, um, I felt all kinds of really, really bad emotions and depression and all kinds of things. But then I spent, it was like 2 years ago, a year ago, um, that I went through a period of feeling very flat and bland, and like nothing could make me happy or fulfill me. Nothing. You could have offered me a round the trip world, like the man of my dream. It was literally like I felt so flat. I didn't feel massively depressed. I could go about and do my day as normal, but it was like passionless is the word. Like I just had no passion for anything. It was a really difficult period. And it's kind of in hindsight and when I was getting out of that period that I saw what it was, or at least what I feel it was and what helped me get out of that period. What I realised was that when I first went through my awakening, I lumped a lot of my energy into spiritual work, spiritual practices, you know, and yeah, I stopped seeking pleasure in so many what we'd call ego things, but I just literally transferred that energy into the spiritual world. And I like to call that like the spiritual ego. Obviously, we might have different opinions, but that's like what I call that world. And I went hard into it, and I managed to pacify myself in the spiritual world for quite a long time. You know, I was never really like happy, fulfilled, but I was getting periods where I was, and then, you know, and I was growing and I was evolving, and it wasn't pointless. And I do feel like there was a reason for going through that stage, because I don't feel like I would be where I am now if I hadn't gone through that like super spiritual phase. But I was still seeking outside of myself, like what meditation might make me feel better, like what crystal might make me feel better, like what healing might make me feel better, and what, you know, they were still like, oh, I'll do a reading, you know, like they were all still outside of me. And although they felt more fulfilling at the time because I was leaving this world behind and going into this world, and it felt higher vibration, like, and it was clearing me at times, I was still not finding fulfillment within myself. I was still seeking externally. It's just that those external things were potentially seen as more spiritual and more healthy. And then I got to the point where I started to see through all that stuff, and I was like, oh, you know, and I realised how it was just kind of pacifying me and kind of just making me feel better temporarily, but I wasn't really doing it inside. And that was a big shift, because I thought I was. Like, on this journey, I feel that there's a lot of times when I feel like I've cracked something because I've heard it, I've spoken about it. And then when I really embody it, I'm like, oh yeah, like I can see how I wasn't living it back then. So for me, this real period of kind of joylessness and flatness and was when I was still seeking, well, it's actually when I was stopping seeking pacification externally, but I just didn't know how to find it within yet, like to truly find it within, like not through spiritual practices or you know, healings and these kind of things. So I started to see through that, and I realized that that wasn't the ultimate embodiment, but I hadn't yet learned how to fulfill myself. And I literally was there for like a year or something, you know, like with slight fluctuations of that, where I was really seeing through how I was using the spiritual world to continue looking outside of myself. I was seeing through it, but I hadn't really learned how to fully embody it. And it's only when I realized, like, truly embodied that I was the creator of my experience, that went away. And my passion returned, and I felt like super passionate about things again, and things I couldn't find passion within that period as well, because a lot of it is the way, like it's the inside out, you know, and it doesn't mean that there weren't some enjoyable things in those things before. It's just that I'd gone beyond being able to use them as a fulfillment. So I was still seeking externally to fill the void. I do obviously feel like once you fill the void, you can still, you know, enjoy traveling, you can still enjoy painting, you can still enjoy all these things, but they're all like there's so much more enjoyable when they're coming from like a place of embodiment and a place of fulfilled, like being fulfilled internally. And you know, I feel like that there's like two steps to the journey, or there was for me anyway. There was like the seeing through of like doing what's considered really egoic things to fill the void, and then I went into like very spiritual things, but they were still filling a void. And yeah, there was this really, really long period of just feeling so flat all the time. Like, oh, it was so, because it's like when you've got passion, there's like ways to move forward, but I just felt so stuck. But it really was that necessary process of just like going in and just keeping on, like bringing it back to self. And that journey, I'm sure, will be at different lengths for everybody. Mine actually, yeah, like really rolled on. But I didn't understand why I was feeling it. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting any happiness at all from these things that used to make me feel happy. The few things left, you know, like the spiritual world. And that, yeah, then came the understanding that it was still pacification. It was still seeking externally, even though it was under like a spiritual umbrella. So that for me was really how to move through that period. And it wasn't a quick transition, as I said, but it was really embodying. It was like the first work that I thought I'd been doing for years was probably just moving out of one set of like pacifying to another, like that was under a spiritual umbrella. And then the true awakening for me, and you know, like there's always levels of awakening, but that level of true awakening was about truly embodying myself as the creator, and not seeking for that fulfillment of it externally. And then, yeah, then you start to get passion back for all the things that you couldn't then, because they're just like things that you fancy doing with the day, and they're fun, but they're not coming from the same place of like trying to patch up over the void. And the same with people as well. Like, you know, it's not about filling that void up with a person. It's about embodying that union and that being reflected externally. And we know it and we talk about it and we say it. But I mean, I said it for years before I like fully now feel like understand, like truly understand that concept, you know. And obviously there's still work to go for me, but I just feel so much more embodied is the word. And I don't really have those periods. I do get tired, I still clear stuff, but I don't really have that like completely flat joyless thing anymore. I certainly don't have it for very long. I don't have it for that like super extended period, but that for me was definitely the transition period. So it was an amazing place to be. Like I didn't feel it, but it was actually my true awakening. It was like coming out of like the sort of hiding behind the spirituality and the spiritual ego, and it was like truly like coming into wholeness or beginning that journey. You know, like I thought I'd begun it, we're always working on it, right? But that felt like the really true kind of leap. So embrace that period, because it is good, because it means you're not finding fulfillment in external things anymore. So the only next step can be to find fulfillment in yourself. And yeah, we're not used to that, and it's hard, and it's like don't even know how to do it because we just haven't been coming from that place. But it is that big step, and for me that's been the most vital step, because it's taken me into a place of like a lot more fulfillment and happiness, you know, and none of those kind of old dense emotions, or certainly not a lot of them anyway. For me, coming into understanding yourself as a creator of your reality, it gets rid of a lot of those, because you can't feel like a victim anymore. You can't say, oh, this person did this to me, and oh, life's unfair, because you take ownership and responsibility for your creation, and that doesn't really make you feel sad in the same way as feeling like a victim makes you feel. It's still actually, even if something you don't want happens, it's still empowering, because you then realize, yeah, okay, I still got some work to do, but I created this that I didn't want, and I can create what I do want. And that's a massive shift. It's really the shift from feeling like a powerless victim to empowered. And that doesn't mean that every day you manifest everything you've always wanted, but you know when you don't, it's your creation, and you own it and you take responsibility. And that is the shift. And there's not the same level of sadness when you have that feeling, because you're still empowered even when you experience stuff you don't want. You're empowered knowing that you created it, and you can create something different for yourself. It's just going to take a bit of work. So yeah, that's how I moved through that period of feeling like void and passionless into feeling better. So I hope that helped anyone that's in that stage, or going through that stage. Okay, all right, bye.